My name is Ole. I'm in charge of data here at Project A, and I'm super happy to host this session on using data to manage marketplace balance at scale. And there's probably no other venture in our portfolio who could tackle this topic better than Catawiki, which is a very well established and still growing marketplace out of the Netherlands. We invested in marketplaces for quite some time here at Project A, and all of these businesses sort of faced a similar challenge of basically balancing out supply and demand, hopefully in a more data-driven way so that you don't run into any bottlenecks on either of the two sides. And that's quite challenging, but there are certain KPIs to look at and certain strategies to obtain. And Roman, who is leading an insights team at Catawiki, will share more about their journey and their experiences and learnings. So super happy to have you here today, Roman. And yeah, please go ahead. You can share your screen, jump into the slides. I'll be here managing the chat, sharing a link to Wander later on, where you can also talk directly to Roman after the session. And but you can already post questions that you want us to pick up after the talk. So yeah, without further ado, welcome and let's go.
Hi, so my name is Roman. As Ole said, I'm working at Catawiki. So Catawiki is the largest marketplace for special objects in Europe at the moment. And I've been working there since 3.5 years. So I had the opportunity to really see it evolving. So this is then what I would like to do today, to take you through this journey from the very early days of Catawiki until now, and show you an example of how the data team really helped the company to grow marketplace balance at scale. So what is Catawiki? Maybe, I guess many here don't know what it is. So we are based in the Netherlands, but we are acting in overall Europe. And Catawiki basically connects people who have passions to objects that tell their stories. So objects like art, antiques, vintage watches, classic cars, special editions of comic books, like all these wonderful items. And we have some specificities that make it hard to do on a day-to-day basis. We are a marketplace, as you probably know already. So people can buy and sell objects, and our core point of distinction from other similar marketplaces is that we are curated. So every single object that goes into the platform are screened by experts, as you can see on the picture, and we have them for all the categories of objects that you can find. And another key aspect is that we do auctions. So that means that prices, they are never fixed in advance, and that makes it even more interesting for data people, but also challenging. So now that I said we have auctions, probably you understand why marketplace balance is key to us. So obviously, if the demand is really high, so we have a lot of visitors willing to buy items, but there is not many objects available, what will happen is that the prices are going to rise and people will think it's too expensive, and they will leave. And if the supply is very high and there are not many people willing to buy them, prices are going to stay very low, and sellers will be extremely unhappy and also leave the platform. So that is why for the company to grow and scale, we need to grow supply and demand really hand in hand. And that's quite challenging specifically for Catawiki because we are selling very different things. So it's not like we focus on one specific sector. We have 80 categories that have nothing to do between each other. Like a classic car is totally different object than a comic book. And we are currently having about 65,000 objects in auction every week. So it's quite a lot of items that we need to track and make sure the auctions, go well. So now our story. So when we started back in the days in 2012, 2013, we had like 30 auctions per week. And then we only needed to ask one expert or two, how did the auction go? And that would work, of course. In 2015 or 16, we reached much more than 300 auctions per week, and it was not scalable anymore to ask experts to their opinion about every single auction. So we needed more neutrality, and obviously, as we are talking about data, we really invested time into building a data warehouse and build like nice dashboards that can really show us what are the categories that are lacking demand and what are the categories that are lacking supply. So that's already great because we knew where there were problems with certain metrics. But then you may ask, and so what, right? Because if we know there is a problem, you need to try to solve it. So then that was our learning number one, I think, in the journey, that detecting the problem doesn't mean fighting it. And for sure, the data team can contribute to automate the reaction to avoid this kind of imbalance to happen. So this is what we did then in 2016 and 17. We had a team that was a bit working like a product team with marketing person, data analyst, a data scientist, and a developer. And they were together testing initiatives to increase demand whenever they would track in the dashboard or through various modeling that the demand is too low. So they would send specific emails, push certain items, run programmatic campaigns, and really automate everything. So it was very fun and creative period, especially for data. And we actually really proved we had impact at the time. So we A/B tested a lot of things, at least as much as possible, showing that we are delivering profits over like higher than cost. We even built like a marketing platform to manage marketplace balance. So like a tool where marketers could go and create audiences very fast or push items to various platforms like Facebook or Google in order to increase advertising on it. And then came our learning number two. So this is great, but this is really firefighting, and firefighting is harder, right? Ideally, you don't want the problem to not happen at all. So in 2018, this is really where we try to get that better. So, and that was actually quite hard. So it requires a lot of planning and a lot of communication. And when the company got much bigger, of course, it became quite difficult. So what we realized is basically that our experts, they were all organized based on categories, which are so different, as I said. But actually our marketing organization, which manages demand, and also a part of the supply side, which is the sales team, were organized on a country structure. And that made communication to manage supply and demand quite impossible, because then there was no strategy to develop one specific category and grow demand and supply hand in hand. So then, of course, we understood that marketplace balance was very important to us, and we changed the organization structure to make it finally a clear responsibility for business managers. So not this team of marketing and engineers and data people who would just react on the problem, but also like make it a responsibility from managers who can really develop a plan to avoid that to happen. So we changed it into this cluster structure where you have both supply people, so experts in sales, working together with demand people, so marketing people, and really building on the success of their own categories that they are managing. And this is then where I think the data team had a big role. So preventing it to happen requires planning. So you want to make a plan to grow your marketing side and your supply side together at the same time. And what we did is to implement a target setting process, which really forced people to communicate together, which was not the case before. And that means around 250 people at Catawiki. So that's quite huge. And here we really changed our mindset from asking one specific analyst to make a forecast in order to decide about the targets of next quarter, which is of course much faster. And the forecast of an analyst is smart usually, but it doesn't foster communication, and it doesn't encourage commitment. So also what we did within the data team is to really make forecasts on the demand side that connect people and these marketing people to the category managers and help them to challenge the plans of the category managers. And we also helped the supply part to plan from their perspective, empowering them with basically planning Google Sheets with a lot of data to enable them to decide what they are going to do. And that really changed how the company evolved in the recent years, because people finally started to focus on key questions that have high impact, like quality guidelines. So what are the objects that we want to sell? And in marketing, what are the categories that we want to focus on? Because we cannot focus on everything at the same time. However, we also realized that back in the early days when we had this whole engine to react on the problems, we also built maybe like a lot of things, and they were sometimes contradicting each other. So you would see in the dashboard that one category is red, but it would not be exactly those items that would be pushed in the campaigns, because we had other models in place, and we were creative, but maybe a bit too much. So that was a bit horrible, because the data structure, as you know, in years, it does evolve, right? And then you have to maintain all of them, and you cannot rebuild all of them. So I think that was our third key learning, which you hear a lot with data presentations, I guess, but being careful with multiplying fancy models. So, and rather start focusing on building like a central multi-purpose model that can then be used for all the use cases, as opposed to one per use case. So, so what we did is quite simple in the end. We went back to our roots, this dashboard that I showed you that we built like 4 years ago now. And we used the same method. So we rebuilt more or less the same. We used percentiles. So we looked at a couple of metrics like number of bidders per item or sell rate compared to historical trends. We looked at the percentile on that and made a score, and we are just averaging it to make a priority index. And now, as a result, everything that is above a certain score, I think we use 80 right now, it's shown red on our reportings everywhere. And those are the exact items that are sent automatically to our marketing campaigns through Products Up or BigQuery, or are used on the website if we do any kind of ranking. So now if I summarize our learnings, so back in 2016 and 17, we understood that detecting the marketplace balance problem is not enough, right? You want to fight it. And of course, the data team can support to really automate the reaction. However, ideally, prevention is better than firefighting, but it requires planning and communication. I still think, though, that data can help on that by suggesting meaningful target setting processes that do foster communication, as opposed to stay on your own as an analyst and deliver a forecast. But of course, that requires the management team to be willing to do that and to have the right organization structure in place. And as a third learning, being careful with multiplying fancy models. So when the company grows very fast and we hire a lot of data scientists, it's really amazing. People are having fun to build like smart strategies. But several years later, you are not happy to discover that many of them are very hard to maintain or to change as the business evolves. So better to build one central model that is multi-purpose, and then everything is consistent, and you can really just use that one for everything. So change this one if anything needs to be changed. And I think I'm done. So thank you.
Well, we have to thank you. It's super insightful journey. Thanks a lot. Here in Run the World, you have the opportunity to request a mic, which should be a small button on the top, no, on the bottom right of your screen. So Alexander, you asked a question. Maybe you can request a mic and ask that directly by joining us. So it would actually, yeah, ask you to share your screen as well. Or Anders, who now also has a question, feel free to request a mic. Otherwise, I can also just read them out. I wanted to start off with, let's start off with Andres here, since nobody has requested the mic so far. So Andres wants to know what KPIs do you actually use, I guess, more on a top level to measure now market balance? What are you looking at to actually know that it works?
Yeah, so I think one of our major KPI is number of bidders per item, for items that don't have a minimum price, and for items that have a minimum price, so a price above which we don't sell it if there is no bid that is above that level, the sell rate. Then we use a couple of others, like number of favorites per items, and stuff like that. But those two, they are really the main drivers. And I think it's quite interesting to see that they haven't changed that much since the beginning of Catawiki.
That's probably a good sign.
Yeah, I also think it's a good sign, because that means that they are mostly still relevant and people then understand them. We always refer to the same things. Now, of course, you have this score, right, that we also use. So we also show it to people in our main dashboards.
Okay, cool. Stephanie is asking about the underlying technology. So she wants to know which tool do you actually use for the liquidity dashboard, probably referring to the reporting tool.
Yeah, so that has changed. So before, as I said, we really built that, the one you can see on the picture, we really built it from scratch with the developer. Now we're not doing that. So we use mostly Data Studio, Google Data Studio for visualization. But we also actually use Google Sheets a lot for certain dashboards, which may sound outdated, but I still think that a lot of people really enjoy reading Google Sheets. So some of our dashboards are in Google Sheets, and yeah, it's working well.
Nice. Yeah, I'm actually really fascinated that Catawiki at its scale is using Data Studio, which usually our ventures start off with and then move to, I don't know, Tableau or Looker. But I feel like you did a consolidated effort to really structure your Data Studio reports and make them available to the business so they know exactly what's there and it's well documented. And then the setup works really well. So you don't always have to upgrade as much.
Coming back to the talk of Ole, to the talk about modern data stacks that Martin did, I think indeed, so it's not the best tools. They are hard for access management. They are definitely not the best, but they are not expensive. And what we did is indeed really applying really best practices as much as possible so that it's easy to maintain and manage, because we know exactly where is what and what's the naming convention and so on. And I guess that's key for any tool. Somehow there are just some that make it easier, basically.
Cool. If you have more questions, I'm posting the link here now to Wonder. So you can go ahead and move over to our networking platform and find Roman there. If you move around a bit, it's a bit like Pokemon. But once you found her, you can ask more questions. Thanks a lot for joining us today.